Final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number S4N 05955 in the name of Clare-Adamson on electrical safety in the private rented sector. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I would ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. If you're ready, Ms Adamson, I'd be grateful if you'd like to open the debate. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When I was first elected as a councillor to North Lanarkshire Council, I was nominated onto the Scottish Accident Prevention Council's Home Safety Committee. This was not an area that I had any expertise or any knowledge about at all, but I soon was engaging with people who were expert in this area, home safety officers from across Scotland, ROSPA, Home Safety Scotland, Electrical Safety Council in Scotland as well. And I soon learned of the very many dangers that exist to people in their own homes. And obviously, as we're moving towards a situation where many people are renting privately, this has become an issue of particular concern. I remember very vividly visiting an event hosted by Fife Fire and Rescue Service, who were engaging then with the Polish community in their area and actively engaging with the Polish community and offering fire safety visits. And in very many cases, when they visited private rented properties, they were aware of poor maintenance, they were aware of innovative methods of getting the electricity supply to work with not the right plugs, as coming from a different part of Europe. And really, they worked very, very hard in engaging with the community about their rights as tenants to expect that the properties that they're living in were of a reasonable and safe standard. And earlier in this year, I hosted a roundtable event in the Parliament very recently. It was attended by Fire and Rescue Services, by the Electrical Safety Council, by Select, who are the corporate organisation for electricians in the country and who accredit electricians, also by some estate agents and private landlords, and by the Housing Department of the Edinburgh Council, all of which were sharing their concerns about some of the issues to do with privately rented properties. There is no standard for electrical safety within privately rented properties, other than the expectation that landlords would be, good landlords would be looking after their tenants. But there's a particular issue with an RSD that can be fitted to a fuse box, which is also not available in a lot of council houses, but not available in a lot of our own houses as well. And what this does is prevents an electric shock from some of the standard problems that we would imagine of a child maybe putting something into the socket of a supply, or some event happening in the house where there was a surge of electricity. Actually, this cuts out the electricity supply and prevents serious harm under those circumstances. And I know that the Electrical Safety Council have been very active in promoting the fitting of these devices in all our homes, and certainly I do believe they are available in new build properties. Fire safety is a huge problem in Scotland. We have one of the worst records of fires in the European Union. And although some of the issues around this have been tackled by the government when they looked at the serious causes, and we can understand that alcohol and drug addiction can cause problems with fires, there's also a serious problem from electricity fires in Scotland through poor maintenance. And I have to commend some of the work that's been done across Scotland. Take, for example, by North Lanarkshire Council Trading Standards, who, having looked at the statistics in terms of people who were burned by electricity blankets, which developed faults, actually offered the facility for people to bring those blankets in and have them electrically tested free of charge at local libraries to ensure that there wasn't a danger for them. And obviously, people were then given a chance to purchase new blankets and replace ones that were potentially very, very harmful. Our private tenants have a very, very difficult situation. We know, and from the roundtable discussion it became apparent, that many landlords are still not registering with their local authorities. And while the good landlords are probably the ones that are registered and are bought into ensuring the safety of tenants, we have to recognise that there is still an element out there who are not participating under the legislation and conforming to what is expected of them as good landlords in Scotland. So I'm pleased to bring this motion today because I think, although electrical safety is a huge issue for all of us in all of our homes, and the benefits of that from the installation of smoke alarms and from smoke detectors has shown them to be very effective in preventing house fires. In the private rented sector, we still have, in some respects, not for all, but for some of the poorer landlords, this element of people not taking into consideration what is out there. I'd just like to close, Presiding Officer, by talking about the work that the Electrical Safety Council in Scotland have done. And they have actually produced a leaflet for potential tenants, explaining to them what their rights are as tenants and what should be expected of them when they're looking into and investigating what is available in properties, and really bringing to the fore the importance of electrical safety, both from white goods that may be already in the property to actually looking for the RSDs that would prevent the electrocution that is so dangerous, and also just to help in raising awareness of how important electrical safety is in properties and how vulnerable some people can be. And I commend them for their work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now for caller Malcolm Chisholm, to be followed by Richard Lyle. 4 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to congratulate Clare-Adamson on bringing forward this very important motion, and, like her, commend the work of the Electrical Safety Council, including, in fact, the submission they made to the recent consultation on the private rented sector, which I'll refer to in a moment. I think the general point to make at the beginning of the debate is that the Scottish Housing Quality Standard has done great work for the social rented sector in Scotland, and as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, we need to have a similar standard for the private rented sector, and clearly issues to do with electricity should be an important part of that standard. Now, a number of striking facts come through in the Electrical Safety Council's response to the government consultation that I referred to a moment ago. While praise is given for the work of the strategy group thus far, the Council was keen to highlight that stronger emphasis was needed on improving safety conditions within the sector and encouraging landlords and tenants to access information. As they point out, a Populous study in February 2012 found that 29% of landlords and 40% of tenants do not know who is responsible for electrical safety within their properties. When there is so much scope for wear and tear, particularly in properties with a high turnover of residents, there is also scope for poor maintenance and serious injury. Therefore, standards must be more explicit and enforcement must be more effective. One way of ensuring that standards are properly enforced is to provide a mechanism through which tenants may access support where the landlord fails to meet their pre-stated obligations. This could be done through strengthening the private rented housing panel, which of course was set up in the 2006 Housing Act, with which I had a little to do. Now, that measure is supported by the Electrical Safety Council, and it would go some way to enforcing standards. The private rented housing panel already provides a vital mechanism for tenants to seek redress if their landlord fails to meet the repairing standard, but it could go much further in making sure that the standards were more explicit and detailed. This would give out a clear message to landlords that compliance will be strictly enforced where the safety and well-being of tenants is put in jeopardy. The Council goes further in suggesting that it may be advisable to allow third-party referrals for tenants who may not have the confidence to come forward to the panel with a case. I am inclined to back this suggestion, as it means that issues of those who may not complain for whatever reason will be acknowledged and addressed. It is important that a new strengthened private rented housing panel has the ability to process cases efficiently and quickly, ensuring that any failure to meet the repairing standard is challenged with the threat of removal from the register for landlords. The Tenant Information Pack could also be an important part of the way forward. The new Tenants Information Pack, introduced as part of the Private Rented Housing Scotland Act 2011, required that landlords provide a standard document when each lease is initiated. This was a welcome improvement. The TIP not only reinforces the responsibility of the landlord to provide clear and fair information at commencement of a tenancy, but also gives residents a reference throughout their occupancy that helps them to hold landlords to account. Clear guidance like this is essential in providing reassurance to residents, particularly if they feel they have a case to refer to the Private Rented Housing Panel. In the TIP, there is reference to electrical safety and the recommendations made by the Electrical Safety Council. However, there is little detail given on the frequency of inspections and electrical tests. In its response to the Tenants Information Pack, the Electrical Safety Council suggested a rule of 5 yearly inspections be set, but this is not reflected in the body of the TIP as finally finalised by the Government. The Council, in its response, suggested that the pack should include questions around this, as well as specific information about portable appliance testing and residual current devices. So I think the Scottish Government would do well to heed the advice of the Electrical Safety Council. I would support all the recommendations that they make, and I hope that they can be included in the minimum standards for private rented housing, which we hope to see soon.
Many thanks. I now call on Richard Lyle to be followed by Alex Johnson. 4 minutes, please, or thereby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I begin by thanking Clare-Adamson for bringing to the Chamber this evening a motion about an issue that we should all be concerned about. I too would like to associate myself with the comments made in regards to this Scottish Parliament's commitment to raising housing standards within the private rented sector, and in particular regards to electrical safety. Electrical safety is a priority and has recently been a storyline in a national soap where the character nearly died messing about with electrical equipment. In her opening remarks, Clare-Adamson alluded to some of the factors that can increase the risks associated with poorer electrical safety. Poor maintenance being one, lack of knowledge among landlords of their responsibilities to the resident is another. Landlords have a duty of care and they must safeguard their tenants. With regards to the point made about the lack of knowledge among landlords, I would echo that and agree that more and more must be done to ensure that landlords are made more aware of their responsibilities and potential implications of not fulfilling those responsibilities. I do note, however, that the Tenant Information Pack, a pack providing important information to tenants who rent their homes privately, has been published in February this year by the Scottish Government, and from May 1, 2013, landlords will have a legal duty to provide new tenants with this pack. I believe that this action, along with others, highlights the Scottish Government's commitment to this serious issue. The other factor that has been mentioned, Presiding Officer, is poor maintenance. The repairing standard is contained within the Housing Scotland Act 2016. It sets out a number of criteria that the landlord must meet, including the requirement of the landlord to ensure that water and heating installations in the property, as well as fittings, are in reasonable condition and properly working order. Ignorance of this law is not an option. The requirement is. This is important, Presiding Officer, as this ensures that clean running water and the necessity to heat a home is present. These are basic necessities. The Housing Scotland Act 2016 means that if any landlord fails to meet the standard, a tenant may take the case to the Private Rented Housing Panel. The aim of the panel is to make it quicker and easier for tenants to make landlords meet their legal obligations. Measures like the Housing Scotland Act must be implemented and enforced more stringently to protect Scotland's people from the dangers posed by poor electrical safety. I do believe, however, that the Chamber should recognise that the Scottish Government are doing their bit to fix these problems and ultimately to safeguard Scotland's people. There is a strategy document by the Scottish Government on the private rented sector due to be published later this month. This has been jointly worked upon in partnership with the Scottish Private Rented Sector Strategy Group and will fit well with the Government's overall housing strategy. And I am sure in the answer that the Minister will give us shortly that she will ensure us that this work is ongoing. I would also like to pay tribute to Electrical Safety Council Scotland for all the work that they are doing and are continuing to do, along with the many other organisations that work to protect tenants against death, injury through electric shock or fire, and improve electrical safety in private rented sector homes. in my region of central Scotland and throughout the rest of the country. I would like to close by once again thanking Clare Adamson. Having known Clare for years, I know it is a subject which is close to her heart, and I thank her for bringing this issue to the Chamber, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the debate. Thank you, President Officer.
Thank you very much. And I now call on Alex Johnson to be followed by Bob Doris. 4 minutes, please, or thereby.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Safety in the home, as has been pointed out by many in this debate already, including Clare Adamson herself, is a vital area that we should all be concerned about, not least that of electrical safety, which has the potential to cause serious accidents and even deaths on some occasions. I notice in the opening speech there was a mention of Polish wiring or Polish electricians. I have to say that I've heard similar stories, but in all honesty I have to say that you only have to ask my wife and she will tell you that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, regardless of who is responsible for it. It's important that when we take this forward, we acknowledge that there is a genuine requirement, a genuine desire across the board to achieve the objectives that have been set out in this motion. Not only is it the responsibility of government and those in this Parliament, but the representative organisations of private landlords themselves are extremely keen to ensure that we make progress in this. Yet we must be careful to ensure we do it in the right way. It is, of course, very easy to set out regulations or procedures that should be observed. But the problem is, if we don't get people to actually act upon these, then we inspire overconfidence when that is inappropriate in some circumstances. Similarly, a system which is put in place to allow those who are the victims of poor standards or inappropriate standards to get some redress is not simply the cure-all and end-all, because those who have suffered as a result of bad wiring would rather it hadn't happened at all. Of course, if we look at the practices that concern us most, it's easy enough to realise that, of course, good landlords are doing that already. And that the bad landlords, whatever proportion there are, and I suspect it may be relatively small, are the cause of the problem. Yet if we regulate further, the good landlords will apply these new regulations, and the bad landlords may not apply them as they failed to apply the previous set of regulations. So enforcement is the key. And it is important, therefore, that we don't force people into a kind of black market in the provision of property. We need to get landlords, whoever they are, to be willing to engage. And that's why I would encourage the Government, as it goes forward, to look at ways to ensure that regulation is, wherever possible, light touch, that it does not add to the burden and cost of becoming a private landlord to such an extent as it encourages some to operate outside the market or outside the regulations in an illegal way, because that, again, would give us a disadvantage. It has to be said that here in Scotland we have come to understand in recent years the important contribution that private landlords can make to solving many of Scotland's housing problems. And it is important that we acknowledge that private landlords themselves have a great deal to contribute towards this. But we must work hand in hand with private landlords. We know that they are willing to do what is necessary to achieve higher standards, and we must never make the mistake of demonising those who are in the private sector providing property for rent because they are so vital to what we are trying to achieve. It's not a case of private bad, public good. It's a case of everybody pulling together to ensure that we encourage appropriate standards, appropriate high standards of safety in the home, and that we don't get the problems we've experienced in the past. It's therefore my pleasure to support the Government in its intention to ensure that we increase safety levels in the private rented sector, and I look forward to taking the opportunity to contribute to that process by ensuring that we work with the landlords and not against them.
Thank you very much. I now call on Bob Doris, after which we'll move to the Minister for the closing speech.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start off, as others have done, thanking Clare Adamson for bringing this issue to the Chamber this afternoon. Can also thank Clare Adamson for hosting that roundtable discussion on electrical safety in this Parliament. I found it very useful and very informative to hear the frank and constructive exchange of views at that meeting. Can I start off by talking about the Tenant Information Pack, as others have mentioned? I think I should say the formation of that Tenant Information Pack, I think we should appreciate that the Electrical Safety Council was a very constructive partner in terms of the safety aspects of that, and so were the Scottish Association of Landlords and others who were keen, the good landlords, the many good landlords who were keen to see that Tenant Information Pack take place. And I'll just put one or two quotes on the record in relation to that. Margaret Burgess, the Minister, said, "The introduction of the Pack will contribute towards ensuring that the private rented sector provides good quality and well-managed accommodation. Both landlords and tenants understand their respective rights and responsibilities." And the key word there, of course, is responsibilities in conjunction with rights. I would stress that. The Scottish Association of Landlords said, We are encouraged by the possibility offered by the Tenant Information Pack to improve and maintain landlord-tenant relationships. The Pack is also a helpful resource which will raise awareness of both landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities." And there's that word again, responsibilities. So we've actually got partnership working with the private rented sector and how we improve standards and responsibilities. So what does the Tenant Information Pack say in terms of electrical safety? It says, "Your landlord, in accordance with the repairing standards for private rented properties, must ensure that the electrical installation and appliances provided with the property are in a reasonable state of repair and in proper working order." It does go on to say a little bit more, which I won't put on record due to time constraints, but there's no great detail as to what an acceptable standard and an acceptable working order are, and I think that scratches beneath the surface of how we have to flesh some of this out. And to give you an example, when the weather improved in the last week or so, Presiding Officer, I was out cutting the grass. I did cut the cable. I know it's surprising, Mr Johnson, that I would do any physical exercise, but I did cut the cable, and because of the RCD fitted in the new build house that I stay in, I was perfectly safe. I would merely say that tenants in the private rented sector surely deserve similar safety protections when they go about their business. I think that's something that I was mindful of when that happened to myself just the other day. So how could we take this forward? Well, the Electrical Safety Council is asking for proof of an inspection of electrical installation every 5 years by a qualified electrician. It's asking that portable appliance testing on electrical appliances provided by the landlord every 5 years also, and a statement in relation to residual current devices and whether they're installed or otherwise. Now, instinctively, I'm tempted to say, yes, let's do all of this, but I'm also minded by Mr Johnson's comments about what you do is you put further burden and regulation on well-performing landlords, and the cowboys ignore it all. So I would be looking, before we gave any commitments, to bringing in further regulation in the private rented sector, which I think we should do, incidentally, but we must do in a planned and evidence-led manner. We must make sure that there's a business impact assessment in relation to how it will impact on the good, well-performing private landlords. How can we incentivise the good and well-performing private landlords to do a lot of this stuff in preparation for any further regulation that may come into place? And more importantly, if we're not able to crack down on the cowboys well enough just now under current rules and regulations, we have to think again. And I was part of scrutiny in various pieces of legislation in the last session about how we increase fines on unregistered landlords, and there is some success coming through in that, but it is only some success, and this Parliament has shown a willingness to legislate on that. But we do have to think again in relation to that. Presiding Officer, with your indulgence, I'd just like to finish off by making perhaps one suggestion. The Scottish Government is funding many initiatives in the public and private rented sectors and in private dwellings in terms of energy efficiency measures. There's a lot of households in Scotland being contacted right now in various energy efficiency and anti-fuel poverty measures. Surely fitting a residual current device, an RCD, couldn't be out with the realms of possibility, or giving a leaflet on electrical safety. So I'm joined up thinking, if we are going through hundreds of thousands of households currently as we are, as a Scottish Government, perhaps we can weave in some electrical safety as we go along. So, yes, let's do something about electrical safety in private rented sector, but let's make sure it's evidence-based and let's make sure it doesn't have an undue burden on the good performers in the private rented sector. And I thank Clare-Adamson once more for bringing this to the Chamber.
Thank you very much. I now call on the Minister, Margaret Burgess, to close the debate on behalf of the Government. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd also like to thank Clare-Adamson for bringing this issue to debate today. She has highlighted the importance of ensuring that private tenants are able to live in safe homes by reducing the risk of electric shocks and fires from poorly maintained installations and appliances. And the work of the Electrical Safety Council has been mentioned by a number of speakers today, and it should be commended for raising the awareness of this issue and actively campaigning for improvements in safety standards. And I know the points were recently discussed by the round table that Clare-Adamson and the Electrical Safety Council held here in Parliament. And as I think Alec Johnson highlighted, the private rented sector in Scotland has more than doubled since 1999, and current projections suggest that the sector will continue to increase its share of the housing market. We're also seeing an increase in the number of homeowners who are moving up the housing ladder, becoming landlords, often because they are unable to sell their homes due to problems in the housing market caused by the recession. And these landlords, sometimes called reluctant landlords or accidental landlords, are not professional landlords with large portfolios of property. So we need to ensure that they understand their responsibilities as landlords. And we also need to ensure that the bigger landlords who are aware of their responsibilities know and carry out their obligations to their tenants. And it's particularly important that both landlords and tenants are aware of the dangers of electrical fires and electrocution. One of the responsibilities of private sector landlords is to ensure that the homes they let comply with the statutory repairing standard set out in the Housing Scotland Act 2006. And I think this was mentioned, they should make sure that their homes meet this standard before a tenancy begins and at all times throughout a tenancy. And one part of this repairing standard is that landlords must make sure that the electrical installations and appliances they are providing are in a reasonable state of repair and in proper working order. And if landlords are unwilling to carry out the work that should be done to meet the repairing standards, tenants can get help with enforcement, as has been said from the private rented housing panel. And for me, the best way for a landlord to demonstrate that the homes they let comply with the electrical safety elements of the repairing standard is to provide tenants with a certificate from a qualified electrical engineer. But as we saw in the case of gas safety, which is health and safety is reserved, it's true that private landlords have a statutory duty to carry out regular annual inspections to make sure that gas appliances, fittings and flues are safe. And I know that the Electrical Safety Council would like to see a similar duty for private landlords in relation to electrical installations. However, members will be aware of the recent news reports and the survey carried out by Shelter and British Gas, which suggests that 1 in 10 private landlords don't know or don't comply with their statutory duty to carry out safety checks. So this demonstrates to me that more than regulation is required. It is about education and awareness. And all of us, and the Electrical Safety Council are doing it, should highlight that at every occasion we can. And it's for reasons such as that that we did introduce the Tenant Information Pack, which Rob Doris and some others have spoken about. Private landlords now have a legal duty to provide new tenants with this pack, which contains a summary of the legislation that applies to them. And this includes information on property condition and the rights and responsibility of landlords and tenants. The Tenant Information Pack ensures that tenants are made aware of the importance of electrical safety, that they should ask a landlord about the electrical safety of their home, and that they can ask for a copy of any current electrical safety certificate. And that's important because it is about responsibilities. When people are aware of their rights, then they can exercise them. And I think that's important, that if everyone is aware of it and working together. Because the private rented sector will continue to play an important role in meeting Scotland's future housing needs and in delivering our vision that everyone should live in a high-quality, sustainable homes, and obviously one that's safe to live in. And as has been said earlier, later this month the Scottish Government will be publishing a strategy for the private rented sector. We know that we need to create a regulatory framework that works for both tenants and landlords, one that is effective, proportionate and sets the right standards to ensure quality, but also one that is affordable and doesn't constrain the growth needed for the private rented housing. We want to encourage tenants to think of themselves as consumers who can drive improvement within the private rented sector and support landlords to deliver the improvements needed. And later this year, before the summer recess, we intend to respond to our recent consultation on a sustainable housing strategy. We sought views on our vision for warm, high-quality, affordable, low-carbon homes. And part of this vision is that people should value and take responsibility for the condition of their homes. The vision will cut across tenures. It will engage with the private rented sector, social housing and owner-occupiers. It will cover energy efficiency, physical condition and the need for safe and secure homes. And we will continue to work with all stakeholders, including the private landlords, tenants and the Electrical Safety Council, to raise housing standards and to deliver this vision, because we do want people to be in a home that is warm, comfortable and very much safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes this debate. I now close this meeting of Parliament. Thank you all very much.